All right, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Dr. Stephen Post, and this is Your Superior Self.
Dr. Post, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me today. I have to say that I absolutely love your book, God and Love on Route 80. It was astonishing. I resonated very highly with that book. That book is based off a dream that you had,
Yes.
and you talk about the dream throughout the book. I know you have it memorized. I want to lead into this interview with you telling me your dream.
I can do that, sure. I was a youngster. I was about 12 years old, and I went up to New Hampshire to a Anglican Episcopal Christian prep school called St. Paul's. And when I was up there, I had a real love for philosophy and sacred studies and reading scriptures of the world. And that was what I loved to do. A lot of the other guys were playing ice hockey, which was fine as well. But I was really curious about these questions of spirituality. And when I was 15, I had a dream. It was early in the morning. It was a recurring dream. It recurred 6 times over the course of a year. I wasn't quite sure if I was awake or asleep. It was kind of betwixt and between. And lo and behold, I saw a road that I knew was going to the west. It was covered with dense fog, so I couldn't see very far. And as I was walking, I heard a little scratching sound to my left, and I vaguely made out the contours of a young man's face with kind of scraggly blonde hair. And it looked like he was about to jump off a ledge of some type. And then suddenly, all of the clouds and mist evaporated, and there was the face of a spiritual woman. I thought it was an angel. I didn't see wings, but it was angelic-like. And in this bright blue radiance, she said with a lot of care, "If you save him, you too shall live." And then the dream ended.
Wow.
I didn't know quite what it meant.
6 times, right? I mean, you're 15. Like,
yeah.
What is a 15-year-old boy? Well, one, I'm sure, it's not uncommon of a 15-year-old boy to dream about a woman talking to him, but to be that meaningful, to have that reoccurring. Did you talk about that with anyone?
I did. I couldn't figure it out, and I will not make the claim that I thought it meant much at all. I was perfectly willing to say that, hey, adolescents are kind of desperately meaning-seeking, meaning-creative. They go on desperate detours, and this could just be an overactive mind. But on the other hand, I thought there was maybe something objective about it. I wasn't quite certain. So I actually talked about the dream in my sacred studies class, which was, again, my favorite class, with Rod Wells, who was an Anglican Episcopal minister. He was actually a great friend of Alan Watts, who was one of the major gurus of that generation out west. We were in New Hampshire. But I told about the dream in class, and even at lunch one time on a Sunday, and my friends, there were 8 or 9 of us sitting at a table. It's kind of like a Harry Potter type thing. They didn't know whether to cry or laugh. But they thought I was an okay guy, so they gave me some space, and we kind of talked about it and joked about it a little bit. But then it recurred, and maybe every couple of months I'd have this dream, and Rod Wells would be sitting there in his pew in the chapel of St. Paul and St. Peter, and he'd look at me and he'd say, "Any more dreams?" I would talk with him. But at any rate, he was interested in adolescent spirituality, and since he'd been to Yale Divinity School, for his MDiv, he actually drove me down to New Haven one afternoon. It's a several-hour drive, and I talked about the dream in the class of a Jungian psychologist theologian named James Dittes. And so I told them about the dream, and then they were kind of intrigued by it, and they asked me, so was I having any problems, any mental problems? And I said no. I hadn't been working off a lot of demerits by raking tons of leaves in the sun, or I had not eaten any dyspepsia-inducing hot dogs that I was aware of. So I told them about it, and they said, well, did this make you do anything? And I said, yeah, I actually, on a spur, I applied to Reed College in Portland, Oregon, because that's way out west, and it's something I'd never do. It was completely unlike me, but I did that. And so they were kind of surprised. And I also said that, up there at school, everybody loves, they love to read about the transcendentalists. They love Ralph Waldo Emerson's idea of the oversoul. That's kind of the major articulation of that. And it's a beautiful piece of literature, but I actually believe it. I believe that there's one mind. I don't believe that there are lots of little minds. I believe that there's one mind, and mind is completely different than matter. And we all have some gift of the mind. So we should really treasure our mind and not just think of it as something we can treat poorly. I wasn't a drinker, and I really kept myself pretty clear-headed. So the bottom line is that a couple of years passed by, and I'd gotten into Swarthmore, and I was headed to Swarthmore. And Rod, who only died 3 or 4 years ago, actually in not in Baltimore, but in Philadelphia. He got me a job for that summer of my 17th year in the Bronx, and I was going to be tutoring kids, which I like to do. And I'd done a lot of that in New Hampshire with the French Canadians. There were a lot of relatively poor French Canadian families around Concord, and there was a school across the street, Pleasant Street, where I used to enjoy that. It was really something I loved doing. I'm still a teacher. I've been a teacher all my life. 40 years in medical schools. So my parents really put their feet down. My mother said, you'll get killed. It was too dangerous. And my father was upset about it. And so we argued for about 3 days, roughly. And finally, my mother said, look, if you insist on this, I'm not going to help you out with Swarthmore. And I said, oh, come on, you're kidding me. But at any rate, eventually my father sided with her, and it was 2 against 1. So, okay, I said, I'm not gonna teach in the Bronx this summer, but I'm gonna need a job. What am I gonna do? And my dad was the president of a furniture store. It was actually pretty well known at the time. It's since gone under. It was called W&J Sloan's, and it was up on 5th Avenue and about 40th, kind of across from the old Scribner's bookstore. And he knew all the manufacturers around New York, lamps, tables, you name it. So he said, I'll get you a job. I'll get you a job in Bill DeBono's lampshade factory. So Bill DeBono was a guy who I'd actually met him a few times. He smoked a big stogie, and he had a lampshade factory in Patchogue, which is on the South Shore of Long Island. And so for about 2 weeks, I drove my dad's very secondhand gray Mercedes 190, which I think he only bought because he wanted to look good when he took us up in New Hampshire. I cut cardboard between 2 very, very nice, very large, very sweaty Italian women. There was no air conditioning in the factory. And that's what I did. And I was okay. I wasn't happy about it. But then I decided one Friday night, I'm not going to do this anymore. The push was that, hey, I'm not a factory hand, and I would have Siddhartha in my pocket when I'd go to work, the Buddha. And this was just not working for me. And plus there was the tension at home. So there was a push and a pull.
Sure.
The pull was the dream. The pull was the dream to the West. So the two things kind of acted together. And I went out to West Hampton Beach, which is, another hour east on Long Island. And it's kind of a really nice hangout for young people. I had a couple of friends there from school, a girlfriend as well. And about 11 one night, again, a Saturday night, I decided that I was not working in the factory another day. And I told my friends I was heading west. I was following the dream. And I drove down the Sunrise Highway. I had about $50. I had my classical guitar. I had my copy of Siddhartha and a few other things, pair of underwear, not much. And I just drove west. And
Wow.
I went through the Midtown Tunnel and I drove across town. And I'd never actually driven over the George Washington Bridge previously, but I kind of knew that's what I had to do. So I followed signs for the bridge. And as I crossed the bridge, there were two options. There was 95 south, but there was no south in the dream. Okay, right now it's probably about 1 a.m. But there's also a sign that says Route 80 West. And west was the dream. So I just followed that sign. I just went west on that sign. I'd never been through Jersey. I went through the Delaware Water Gap. And about 5:30 in the morning, 6 in the morning, it's pretty dark out and can't see very far. I'm thinking I'm going to turn around because I figured if I did a U-turn on the midway, it would restore my reputation. This would be a forgotten episode. but I had mixed feelings. I thought, maybe I really should go west. I'm still doubting the dream. But suddenly the cars at that time had generators, and a generator, you don't see them much anymore, but when a generator breaks down, all the lights, the engine, everything goes completely flat. And so I was able to get over to the right-hand shoulder just barely, because there were a lot of big trucks out there. And I looked around, and all it was, fields with, dark fields in the very early morning. And there were no cell phones back then. I was near it turns out Route 15, which is the exit to Lewisburg. So I took a piece of paper out from the glove compartment and I wrote a notorious letter for which I became very infamous in my family. I wrote it in pencil and it said, "To the Pennsylvania State Police, please return this car to Henry A.V. Post, 44 Davison Lane East, West Islip, New York, 516-669-5655, from his son, Stephen, who no longer works in the lampshade factory."
Oh, you had to put that in there.
Yeah, I had to put that in there. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it was annoying. And so I put my thumb out and I got a big white truck came by. I won't go into that, but I did eventually, make myself a journey out to San Francisco. I called my mother actually from Lincoln, Nebraska. I was in a VW van full of sort of hippie type folks. And one of the young ladies said, "You should call your mom." So they pulled over and I made a call, collect, of course. And my mother said, "Oh, Stevie, you're alive. Thank God. We can call off the Pinkertons." Do you know, Trey, who the Pinkertons are?
Yes. The Western movies,
They're detectives.
The law.
Yeah. They're still around, they're still in business. And so I said, "Mom, why did you call the Pinkertons? Didn't you get my note?" That was another not so good thing to say. So I said, "You really should have let me teach in the Bronx." And she said, "We kind of think that's probably true at this point." But anyway, water under over the dam. And I got out to San Francisco, where I had a cousin, George Lamont, who was a graduate of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He was older than me. He was a great guy. He'd done 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. And he lived in the Mission District, which is kind of at the time was sort of the Vietnam vet subculture of San Francisco. he drove a motorcycle, and he was a superintendent in a building. So he took care of me a bit. He let me sleep on the floor. I started playing classical guitar, Tarrega, Granados in Hispanic bars at night, and I was making pretty good money. And then just down on the corner of Chenery Street, this was 16 Chenery Street and Market Street, there was a Nichiren Shosho Buddhist temple. And that's one of those temples where people chant a lot, and they have a chant that goes Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, which basically means I am one with the heart of the universe, something along those lines. You can translate it a lot of different ways. And so you'd have beads, you'd be in a room full of people, and it was really quite powerful. It felt kind of like being beyond time and place. So I really enjoyed that. And the summer was going good, and I did not intend to ever go back to school. I figured I didn't need it, I was perfectly happy. But I drew a really bad draft number, and that was when they put your birthday in bins, and I did poorly. So I was headed for Vietnam in all likelihood. So I called the people at Reed College, and I said, look, I'm out here on the West Coast, and I know I turned you down, which I had, and but I know you're a good place, you're a good school, and I got this bad draft number, and I'm wondering if you'd readmit me. And they said yes. So sort of early September, I'm down at the temple on Market Street with George and Gus and some other people I knew there, and they were saying goodbye. It was early, it was pretty early. It was about 7 in the morning because I wanted to get an early start. I was heading all the way up to Oregon. And they gave me as a going away present a Gajon zone, which is a kind of a strange concept for most people, but it's basically just a scroll. It's about this long. It's about 3 feet long, and it's got some Japanese writing on it, and basically says, one mind, one heart, and never too busy to love. Basically, what a Gajon zone says. And Gus told me that. Gus was my translator. So I thought that was really cool. I rolled it back up. I put it in my backpack, and I had my few belongings, and I took the bus to the Golden Gate Park, which is a big park, and you have to walk a pretty almost a mile to get over to the foot of the Golden Gate Bridge. And I walked across the park, and it was very foggy, very misty. And you start going up that foot of the bridge, and it's rocky. There's a lot of stone there, and it's slippery. It's a little treacherous, actually. But I got up there on the pedestrian walkway on the left, and again, I couldn't see more than about 2 feet in front of me. There was almost no visibility. And I got to the middle of the bridge, and I heard some scratchy noise to my left. And I squinted really hard, and I kind of made out the contours of a young man's face. And he had, sort of dirty, stringy blonde hair. And he clearly really was out on the edge of the bridge, ready to jump. So I looked at him, and I don't know if he saw me or not, but I think he kind of saw me from the corner of his eye. And I said, I surely hope that you don't intend to jump. And I said it calmly, and he just lit up after me. He was reading, he was screaming Shakespeare, life is empty nothingness. And I said, there's some truth to that. I think we're not that far apart. But the trouble is, you're on that side of the railing and I'm on this side. So then he got even angrier, and we went for a while. But I said, look, let me tell you why I think I'm here. So I told him the story of, and I dragged it out. I told him the story of the dream. I told him about going to Yale Div School. I told him about the argument with my parents. I told him about stealing Dad's car, leaving it on Route 80, and all the details. And And I said, I'm not sure, but I think you're the guy I saw in my dream. And that was about 2 years ago, and it was 3,000 miles away.
Hmm.
And so I said, that's what I think. That's my sense of it. And you look an awful lot like him. And then he thought, you're crazier than I am. And we sort of struck up a friendship in a way. And I said, look, I don't think you should jump. Why don't you come on this side of the railing? And I'm going to give you something that's going to change your luck. Because, if you're, the Buddhists have a lot of little talismans and things that give you luck for the rest of your life. And a Cajon zone is supposed to do that. I said, I'm going to give you a Cajon zone. And if you take this, your life's going to turn around. So he said he didn't believe it, but he still came over. And I showed him the Cajon zone, and I explained it as best I could. Because, I have no expertise, but I told him sort of basically what it was about, that there's really one mind and one heart in the universe, and we all have a connection with it, and therefore we all have a connection with one another. And he thought that was a little crazy too. I gave him a note to my cousin George. This is Harry. Please take care of him. Let him sleep where I was sleeping. Take him down to see Gus at the temple. Just look after him. And I'm going up to Oregon, Steve. So I said goodbye to Harry and waved. And as I walked north on the Golden Gate Bridge, because we're right at the center of that one big single span, suddenly all this incredibly thick fog just lifted. It was like, I guess it must have been like a morning fog over the bay. And it was radiant blue, kind of like in the dream, and I didn't see any women's faces and so forth, but I felt just intuitively that this was the dream coming true.
Mm-hmm.
And I still wondered, well, okay, so what about
now what?
Now what? If you save him, you too shall live. It's something heading my way. I walked down the bridge and I got a ride. There was just a little red Ford Ranger truck, old style. They were small in those days. And the guy, blew the door open and he said, "Where are you headed?" I said, "Oregon." He said, "I'm going to Oregon." It was shocking. And he said, "My name's Dwayne Dill." And then his wife was in the driver's seat. She said, "Yeah, and I'm Dorothy Dill. D-I-L-L, just like in dill pickle. Jump in, young fella." So I got a ride with these two wonderful people and got to Oregon that night. But, all on that trip, I felt suddenly that, these ideas about there being a kind of one mind in the universe, sure, it began to really be plausible.
Well, but then you had this dream, right? So you had this dream. I think the important part is that you followed this, right? And I wanted to talk to you, because I think we all have a purpose here, right? I think there's the universal mind is pulling us all in a direction. Some people ignore that, and some people feel called to go after that. Were there any synchronicities that gave you that confidence to go towards Route 80 with your dad's BMW, right? I don't think it was just you were pissed off at him for making you work at that lamp factory. I think it was, something has to build that momentum for you to start heading west. I want to know what you think a synchronicity is, and then what were there synchronicities that were building that confidence for you to go after that dream?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And in a subtle way, I was reading the Upanishads, and I was reading a lot of transcendentalism and writing even papers, a senior paper at St. Paul's on the idea of the one mind and so forth. So there was a side to me that did take the dream seriously, but there was a side to me that didn't, because I also believed, kind of like, the existentialists, that, human beings make up meaning all the time because we're so scared of the possibility that there's no meaning, there's no destiny, there's no journey in our lives, and we're just kind of marking time, and then we're going to die, and that's the end of the story. And it was much ado about nothing. That's the problem. And so I wasn't going to say that the dream was objectively real. I thought there was a lot of subjectivity in it, and maybe my mind working overtime. But I think it was the push and the pull. I mean, there was enough of a pull in the dream, and people knew about it. Um, uh, there was a pull to the West, but then there was this push uh, away from home at the time, and I think there had to be both
Mm,
together. You know,
yeah.
uh, but then as I got further along, I began to discover that actually maybe there is a destiny, a journey for all of us, and I didn't feel like I was any longer making my life. Okay, I didn't feel like I was creating my life from nothing. I felt like I was following a path that was already there, and I was responding. I was responding to various people I was encountering, but I wasn't making my life. I was, I was responding well to lots of different things. But that's what a journey is like. When you go on a journey, you just don't know.
Mm, you don't know. It's taking that leap of faith, but I feel like the universe gives us these breadcrumbs, right, and tests us, and seeing how serious we are about that dream, right, and saying, all right, well, we'll see, we'll give him an easy task, right, and see how far he takes it, and then we'll give him another one, and then another one, and another one, and you work towards that quest. Because let's be honest, like in my quest of achieving self actualization, there is doubt, there is a lack of confidence, because you know the more that I talk about it, or the more that you talked about it with people don't understand where you're coming from, because they want to be the status quo. They don't want to rock the boat. They want to comfortably die in their careers of 30 years and retire, right?
They want to
Just,
fit in. They want to
yeah,
fit in.
there's that, there's like you said, there's a pull and there's a
Yep.
push, and I love that.
Yeah.
um what would you say to someone, one of your students comes up to you right now with a dream like that? Like, how would you mentor him to follow that?
Well, sometimes people do show up at my door, not because I serve in this big academic medical center as someone in clinical pastoral care, but I perceived as someone who folks want to talk with about these kinds of themes. And so I do listen to students and staff talk about some of the big questions of meaning and depth and direction in their lives. And I always quote, I have a favorite quote. It's actually Eleanor Roosevelt. And it really is my favorite quote. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams.
Mm,
That's it, And because the thing is, if you don't, if you don't follow your dreams, and if you just live your life to fit, and most education is, it's educating people to fit, to fit into this line or that line or whatever it might be, but it's not really educating them to be truly creative, certainly any kind of a spiritually oriented way. It's not necessarily educating them to notice their calling in life, or to really be in touch with their gifts, their talents, and to have confidence that their life doesn't rest on a mistake, and that if they feel strongly that they want to do something, they should give it their best. And the worst you can do is fail. But you got to live up to your dreams, and so I do say that, and that and people respond to that. I think they want more than anything these days. They want to know that they're living a dream, um, and so I counsel them positively.
I think what makes you so, well, this is like your subjective experience, right? Like, objectively, you can't, have evidence that supports that you had this dream and these events occurred out of pure randomness, right? Or statistically significant results of this dream taking place. But you had a dream, like, and it reoccurred, and then you followed that dream and it unfolded in that manner. Like, that to you is a subjective experience of the universe communicating to you through a dream state and then actually bringing it into your physical reality. Like, that has to be a monumental experience in that place and time. Like, how old were you? Like 20, 21?
No, when I had the dream, I was 15. When I was on the bridge, I was 17.
17 years old, and you've already had this just dream and this actualization of that dream.
Yeah, and the thing is, so I'm up at Reed College, and Reed was a pretty cool place. It is an interesting place. It's kind of very avant-garde, and Robert Bly was the poet in residence, so I got to take poetry with Robert Bly, and he kind of taught me my writing style in a lot of ways. And also Steve Jobs was floating around there. He was there for a brief period of time. Then he went to an ashram in India. But it was an amazing place, and it doesn't. So I still, I mean, did I have any doubt about this idea of the one mind at that point? No, I didn't. I mean, I was convinced, but there was still maybe that second half of what the angel had said, you too shall live. And I was a little mystified by it. So that all worked out. It unfolded. You used a good word. It unfolded because in late January, I was sitting in the Reed College coffee shop, and, it doesn't snow up there, but it rains a lot. And it was a pretty cold night. So there's a lot of slush on the parking lot out in front of the coffee house. And this guy came bounding in. I'd say it was about 9 at night. He came bounding in, and he said, "My name's Andy, and I've got the fastest motorcycle ever made." And it was a Harley Davidson shovelhead or something like that. And I didn't know much about bikes, but I was just in the mood to do something crazy. So I said, "I'll go with you." He said, he asked if I wanted to go for a ride. I said, "I'll go for a ride." So I went out into the parking lot, and he suddenly took off. He hit about 120, maybe within, I don't know, a minute or a minute and a half. And he went through every red light and every stop sign, and he was slip sliding on the slush. And then he went south on the Pacific Coast Highway, and he did hit about 170, I thought 180, as I saw. And this rain was coming down in our faces, and he was just screaming into the night. And I thought I was dead. I really thought I was not going to make it. I mean, I just closed my eyes and I cried a bit, and I thought, okay, goodbye life, something along those lines. And then lo and behold, I kept asking, "Would you please turn around?" He finally did. He turned around. He did this incredible kind of Evel Knievel turn, over the midway actually, and sped back to Portland, heading north. And he dropped me off exactly in the place where he picked me up, exactly the same place. And now it's 11 at night, and I'm totally woozy. I can hardly walk. I'm disoriented, and I think I'm not sure if I'm alive or dead. And I walk across this little bridge. There's a bridge over a ravine, and on the other side of the bridge is a dormitory named Ackerman Dormitory, which is where I was staying at the time. And so I walk into the dormitory, and there's a doorway, and then a threshold, and then a common room. And there was a payphone on the wall. Okay, there were payphones in those days, and I never picked it up. It just wasn't something I did. My parents, they had the number. They could call as much as they wanted, but they'd never get a hold of me. So for some reason or another, I'm walking by the phone, and it starts to ring, and I'm thinking I'm just going to pass by, but I actually felt pushed. I didn't see anything pushing me, but I felt an energy that was kind of pushing me to pick up the phone. It was intuitive. It was energetic. And so I actually picked up the phone, and I said, "Hello." And it was my mother. My poor mother, her last words to me are amazing. Actually, I won't go into that, but years later. But she said, "Thank God you're alive." She said, "I woke up." Now, mind you, it's 11 o'clock West Coast time, so it's about 2 o'clock East Coast time. She said, "I woke up and I woke Henry up, and I was so frightened. I had this real feeling that you were in great danger, if not dead. And I'm calling, are you okay?" And I said, "Mom, you know, you got that right, because I thought I was dead too." And so we actually had a pretty meaningful conversation about that. And you know, she was Irish Catholic from Sagaponack, Long Island. They had a big potato farm, and you know, she wasn't a mystic, but you know, we both commented that it's really amazing that you could be, you know, a mother and a son could be 3,000 miles apart, and a mother could have this kind of premonition or feeling about a son. And I mean, you know, you read about it in war stories, you know, families know that somebody got hurt or whatever, but this was really happening. And so for me, at the time, I thought somehow this is how the angel's words closed. You know, if you save him, you too shall live. You know, but somehow this was connected with what happened on the bridge. Now, I don't know, that's just a loose interpretation. It could be completely over the top, but after those two experiences, you know, I definitely felt, and my mother, and there's a picture of it in the book, actually, she was an abstract expressionist, pretty good painter. She did a painting of the Blue Angel Dream, because I eventually told her about it.
Yeah, I love everything in the book, the entire story, right? Like even how you wrote it about, you know, calling yourself the boy. Like it just, I resonate a lot with it, because, you know, I think it's everyone who's following a dream can gain confidence in trusting those subtle breadcrumbs from the universe. There's a quote in here I really like. It's hope is being open to the surprises of graceful synchronicity that echo themes of connectedness.
Yeah.
That connectedness you were talking about, can you explain it? Like the one mind theory, right? Like
Yes.
0 point consciousness, or, you know, I think,
Yeah.
what is it, Dr. Larry?
Larry Dossey. Oh yeah, I love Larry. Yeah.
Why don't you talk a
Larry
little
wrote
bit
a
about
book
that?
called One Mind. You know, he wrote a great book called One Mind, and I've known Larry since about 1990, when at that time he was writing books on prayer, and then he started writing these really interesting One Mind type books. And I actually was there when he first met Sir John Templeton, you know, who was interested in this too. You know, this is at a restaurant at a golf course near Dulles Airport, where I was on the board of the National Institute for Healthcare Research, and we were studying spirituality and health. And Sir John loved that, and Larry loved that because he was an MD. And but Larry and I, you know, we became friends, and we share a lot in common. I have a book that's coming out in May with Johns Hopkins Press called Dignity for Deeply Forgetful People. How caregivers can meet the challenges of Alzheimer's. And it actually has a wonderful blurb from Larry, because I have a chapter in there on paradoxical lucidity, how people can be just sort of there with there's a chapter in Route 80 on dementia with Joe Foley, you know.
Yeah.
But they can just be there, mute, silent, not communicative in the least. And you wonder, are they a shell, a husk? Are they gone? Whatever. And then suddenly you have to be open to surprises. Suddenly they'll have they'll have something to say. They'll come into themselves. They'll be somatic. They'll be rhythmic. They'll call you by name, and you have to be open to this, and you have to notice it and respect it, because it's a message that there's, you know, even loss of memory cannot separate us from our souls. And so, you know, this is, so Larry's really, he wrote a great foreword to Route 80, because it got me freed up from having to explain everything. Did you think?
The one mind. I love that, because I read Larry's work, and I resonate with that that work as well. I think it's I love how you said it. It's we are all like we're fractals of the one mind, right? Like it's not, we're not separate. We're not this dualistic type of I'm separate from this. We're not all like individuals. Like there's something greater happening. We're connecting with something. When we get into these flow states, we're reconnecting with that one mind, and that's where a lot of our creativity comes from. Mikai Csikszentmihalyi did a lot of great research on flow states and how, the self shuts down when you're in flow states and you're connected and you can feel like time slows down. This reality is just, it slows down to a point where you can connect with things and ideas that are outside of you and you can't explain it, right? Like athletes have this. I mean, it's just one example of many, right? Like Joseph Selby, he wrote a book on the physics of God, and he talks a lot about the one mind idea, and he also talks about like multiple personality disorders, right? Like the actual physiological changes in a body. Like people will take on these different personalities, and like things will happen to their body where they change. I can't explain it. It's very interesting to me. Like people's eye colors will change, their voices will change. Um, who else? Lynn McTaggart does
Oh yeah.
studies
Yeah.
on healing techniques, intention, like having group intention meetings or intention healings, where they'll go on a website on Sundays at 1 p.m. and they'll have a photo up and they'll have prayer for that person and do follow-ups. She did a lot of great work with Dr. Schwartz over in Arizona. They did some studies over there. I mean, there's just so much literature out there. I think the paradigm's slowly changing. I mean, you're in the world of academia. Do you see any of this like slowly progressing?
I think it's a split field in terms of the evolutionary neurologists who think everything can be explained by tissue and cells and organs.
Yeah.
But then there are a lot of people in philosophy of mind who discredit that view and think that mind is still a mystery. I mean, the great you talk so nicely, Trey, about creativity. A lot of people have these incredible creative experiences, and they feel that they've been invaded, that it didn't come from them. So like there's a wonderful, people should pick this up as a video. The Man Who Knew Infinity, about Ramanujan, who was from Chennai, which is southern India. This is about 1900. And this kid, he's not a mathematician. He has no particular training in mathematics, but he's doing these chants and praying at the foot of his Hindu goddess. And while he's doing that, he has these inspirations and he writes these algorithms in the dirt with his finger, and then he comes back, afterwards, and he writes them down in a notebook. Some of those actually got published because one of his teachers saw them, and it got published in sort of a bit of a second-rate Indian math journal. But somebody at Cambridge, a guy named Littleton, saw it, and he thought it was the work of genius. So they brought Ramanujan to Cambridge, and they wanted him to prove his. He didn't want to prove anything. He actually did write a couple of proofs in major journals, but he only lasted a couple of years there. In Trinity College, which is the most powerful college at Cambridge University, in the middle of the library, there's a glass casing. I've actually been there. And these are the two notebooks of Ramanujan. And those mathematical equations and so forth are considered to be pretty much the backbone of modern quantum physics.
Really?
Yeah. So he goes, so here's a guy, and there are many, many stories like this. I mean, Faraday, the magnetic field, he was not, he said he got all this in a dream. Einstein had these moments where he went into deep meditation. He called them Gedunken, and he felt invaded by ideas that were not of his own. So that suggests that there is a creative energy, a creative one original mind in the universe, and we can be a part of that. We are a part of it.
Do you ever meditate like that? I mean, as far as like in receiving ideas for like books or programs or anything like that?
Yeah, I've been up early in the morning since I was a teenager. I'm usually up about 5, 4 o'clock. Even my wife complains. But yeah, unless I take time early in the morning. So the ancient um, Jewish rabbis who practiced mysticism, they believed that the early morning was the best time to get into that flow state you're talking about. Because if the supreme being, the ultimate reality, um, exists beyond time and space before the Big Bang, it's even hard to even talk about time actually, then we have an advantage in feeling that connection early in the morning, because like when I get up in the morning, I don't have much of a sense of time. It could be 4:30, it could be, I don't care. And I'm not like looking at my watch and, going from point A to point B. So you're sort of beyond time. And also, I could be in Cleveland. I happen to be in Long Island right now, but I could be in Cleveland. I could be in Oregon. I mean, all I know is I'm on the edge of my bed. So there is a kind of natural flow state time in the early morning where a lot of people feel it's an opportunity to kind of, really get connected with this ultimate reality.
Mm. Well, you fulfilling this dream, this quest, right? Like when you rescued that boy off that ledge, was that the moment that you went from believing to knowing about the ultimate reality?
Yeah, mostly. Yeah. I mean, I knew when I was walking, down the bridge heading north, and suddenly the sun, the blue sky, the sun was so radiant, and it was such a contrast with what had been the case just a minute earlier, that it felt like I was in a whole new world, a whole new universe. So that was, I think, pretty profound for me.
At 17, now you're like, oh, now what? I hope this thing unfolds the way that it's supposed to, because
I don't know. I mean, like anybody else, I've done the best I can with life, but I do feel that I've been very fortunate, and I've had, the book is God, Love, and Route 80 is really a series of about 12 episodes of synchronicity.
Mhm.
And I love see, to me, synchronicity is the real heart of spirituality. It's when somehow or another, oftentimes an answer to a prayer, or maybe not, but somehow or another, the most uncanny connections are there, and the perfect person at the perfect time, in the perfect place, is right there with the perfect loving wisdom for your life. And I actually, I mean, the stories in the book go on. I mean, the one about the walking stick. When I had to leave Cleveland, I spent 20 years at Case Western Medical School. And then there were some difficulties with the administration there. So I really didn't want, we'd raised our kids in Shaker Heights, an inner ring suburb, and I definitely did not really want to leave Cleveland, but I was coming to Stony Brook, and oh my God. So it was like late at night, it was like 11 at night, and I'm with my friend who still lives there, Tom Frudig, who's a lawyer, and we were behind Glidden House, which is a hotel in University Circle near Case Western. And he says, I really can't believe you're leaving. And I said, yeah, but I'm kind of being pushed out in a way. I mean, I've done well here, but they're revamping my position, and I just don't know if it's going to work out. So I took this job at Stony Brook, and which is a great place too. But as we were sitting there behind Glidden House in the shadows that night, I mean, I still talk with Tom about this. Suddenly we heard a little ringing, like a bell ringing, and I squinted and I saw coming out by the side of what's called the Barking Spider. The Barking Spider is an old tavern there. Was this old guy with sort of white hair, and he was African American clearly, and he had a leather jacket on, and he walked over to us, and he had a beautiful stick in his hand, which was carved, had all kinds of wood inlay, and it was really wonderful. And he said, I just knew I had to be here and give this to one of you. And he gave it to me. And I said, but don't you need money? He said, yeah, $40. So Tom actually lent me $40 because I didn't have my wallet with me. And I gave him the $40, and then he wandered off in the night. And I have a friend, my neighbor actually in Shaker Heights, Jan Thrope. A lot of people know Jan. She actually knows this guy. He's been in the papers in the Plain Dealer, and he does carve these beautiful mystical sticks, you know? So apparently he'd had this impression that night that he wanted to come and find the person to whom this stick belonged. So then he said, you know, just follow the stick because it's going to know where you're going better than you will.
Wow. You still have the stick, right? Like,
oh, I have a stick. Oh yeah, absolutely. I have it. Yeah. And sometimes I keep it here and show it to students if they're curious. Right now it's in my bedroom, but in the book, there's a nice picture of the stick across a green chair. And you know, that's the way the universe works sometimes. You know, there's more wisdom in that walking stick than there is in my own sense of purpose.
It's like getting that ego out of the way, like getting yourself out of the way to allow this thing to happen. It's like what Michelangelo, like the sculpture, right? Like he said that it was already there. It was already inside the rock. He just kind of, you know, he had to get to it. It's almost like that.
Yeah, he was great. And then, but the whole thing just goes on and on. And you know, I mean, I run a program in a medical school. I've been teaching in, you know, Chicago, Ann Arbor, Case Western, Stony Brook, good places. And I'm fine in these environments, but everybody kind of knows that at a deeper level, I'm very interested in these ideas of metaphysics and the ultimate nature of reality. Amazingly, you know, along the path, of the many people I encountered, including Joseph Campbell and Mircea Eliade, you know, there was Sir John Templeton, and so Sir John and we were very close, and I wrote the foreword to his book, The Worldwide Laws of Life, which is about gratitude and forgiveness and all the things that you see in why good things happen to good people. And he wanted scientists to come along and talk about these great classical spiritual virtues and try to bring that kind of credibility to them. And so he was looking for a good scientist. And I happen to know very lightly Marty Seligman, who was the father of kind of positive psychology. So I was at the meeting in Philadelphia in 1998 at the Marriott Hotel on Market Street, where Marty Seligman and Sir John Templeton got together. And Sir John, at that point, decided he was going to fund positive psychology. And, you know, look at the last 30 years. I mean, there's everything, you know, whole centers for gratitude, wisdom, forgiveness, kindness, you know, self-control. It's all over. But the amazing thing is that, you know, so Sir John and I became very close. He died in the summer of 2008. Now that's just about the time that I'm leaving Cleveland with my walking stick. Okay. And with my son Andrew, who's about 12, and my wife Mitsuko. I have an older daughter. She was, you know, far away, and so I'm driving here, and I got a flip phone, you know, one of those old style flip phones, and I get a call from Jack Templeton, who's an MD trauma surgeon at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. He's passed away now. And it says, Dad is dying. So Sir John, you know, one of the great investors of all time, Sir John was in Lyford Key in Nassau, and he was dying. He was on his deathbed. And Jack said, Dad is dying, and he has one book that he really wants to write, but he's not going to be able to write. He won't have time. So he's wondering, would you please write it for him? I thought, oh my God, you know, are you kidding? I mean, Sir John was a bright guy, but I can't do that. And So but I said, well, let me think about it. Maybe I'll do it because I was very loyal to Sir John. I'm loyal to a fault. And so I said, did he give you a title? And Jack said, yeah, he gave me a title. What's that? Jack said, Ultimate Reality is Unlimited Love. Now that's a title.
That is a title. But how do you write to that title? That's the thing. It's like,
yeah. So I said, Jack, would you go back to your dad, and ask him if we can put a question mark? I wanted to ease the burden, So he came back about 3 or 4 minutes later. And he said, yeah, Dad said, is Ultimate Reality Unlimited Love? So believe it or not, for the Templeton Press, you can Google it. I wrote a 400-page book that's mainly, used internal to the foundation, and is called "Is Ultimate Reality Unlimited Love?" ? With a foreword by Doctors Jack and Pina Templeton, and it's all about Sir John's thinking about one mind. People couldn't figure him out because he came from a Presbyterian background, and they just couldn't quite get this idea of one mind. That was the sort of basic spiritual, metaphysical, theological category. It's hard for them to do that. But yeah, I never planned anything along these lines. I just basically try to, I have to pray a lot, I have to meditate a lot, and if I think that something is meaningful enough, I'll do it.
Did you have to try hard though to get something? Like you say, you prayed a lot, you meditated a lot, so you just basically followed the path, right? Maybe it's not even like you're following the path. Maybe you become the path, right? Or the path unfolds as you have faith.
Yeah, that's kind of what it is, I think.
Like you say yes to something, right? Like you say yes to something. Like you worked at the hospital, and I don't know if you ever could imagine that you end up where you are today.
Right.
You just kind of follow the events that occur, right? Like as you become interested in something, it opens up doors for something else, and then you proceed that in that direction. And then I think our intent is a major factor in everything that occurs, right? With the universe, it's like, what is your intent? And you kind of take the events as they come to you. And there's really, we change, we evolve. We are evolution. Our consciousness is evolution. And going back to time I used to think that time was like, there is this idea of like, there is no time or space out into the non-physical reality, but it's like, we got to have time. It's like a technology. How else would you evolve if you didn't have time? That's how we know it. I'm not the same as I was 5 years ago, right? There's comfort in that because I know I'm not going to be the same in the next 5 years. Like I'm going to be evolving, consistently evolving, academically, intellectually. It's funny that you bring up Martin Seligman because that's what I want to do. Like I'm going back to school for psychology. I want to get my master's in positive psychology. There's only
positive psychology.
There's only a couple of programs in the United States. You got UPenn, which is, that's where Seligman is, but it's like $30,000 a semester. Or I can go to Life University for like, 10 grand and become a coach. But I think universities today need to really look at positive psychology because it's preventative, right? Like it's about flourishing. It's about everything. It's everything that you're experiencing now in the pandemic that the pandemic has unmasked and said, what is empty in our lives? We're not flourishing. We're not being preventative. Where do you think cancer and disease and stress and all of that comes from? It comes from this materialistic mindset that happiness comes from things. So
I couldn't agree more. And Marty's book Flourish is a good one. But I actually, so in 2000, Sir John gave Marty a bunch of money, and there was a summer, he called it the Positive Psychology College, and he invited people who you will know, like Bob Emmons on gratitude from UC Davis, Eb Worthington on forgiveness, Mike McCullough, people who, Bob Enright on happiness, just sort of, who's who type people. And I was invited more or less as sort of the spiritual integrative thinker more than anything else. And and Csikszentmihalyi was there. You mentioned Mikhail, you know, he was there. And I agree. I mean, flow is so important to, but really, you know, we have to recognize, I mean, the medical students here, but I mean, they're always wanting to do health and wellness and well-being and positive psychology, and they don't just want to do the disease model. You know, they really want to do something more profound, and I think it's a great movement. It's the most significant movement in psychology, and I think in social sciences of the last half century, easy.
Yeah. There's actually, I was going to bring up a study. So like just a midlife crisis, right? They did a study in 2007. Blanche Flower and Oswald they examined the relationship between age and well-being. They sampled over 2 million people out of 80 countries. And they looked at a subset just here, like 500,000 between Europe and America. And they found like a horseshoe shaped curve of well-being, which is, it's higher at younger ages, right? But it goes down when you hit like 40, and it doesn't go back up until you're 60. So it's like, how do you create well-being in that? What is creating that lower well-being in that middle age? Is it the materialistic mindset? Is it because when you're 20, you're free, right? That you're flourishing? Or is it when you're 60, when you retire and you can go do something else? I don't know, but it's interesting to me that 40 is like the lowest point of well-being.
Yeah. Well, you know, those are big generalizations, those kinds of studies. I just think if you follow your dream, you're going to be happy. I mean, I've been very blessed. I've been able to follow my dream in all respects in my life, and I've never, you know, this will make you really laugh. Obviously, it's not in the book, but when I do feel a little bit empty inside, do you know what I do? So I'm on Long Island now. I'm back on Long Island, and I'm an hour from Manhattan. I'm an hour from the George Washington Bridge. I actually drive out over the George Washington Bridge on Route 80, and I drove out toward Lewisburg. Interestingly, my daughter went to college at Bucknell, which is right there in Lewisburg, you know, and when I would drop her off, we were in Cleveland at the time. When I drop her off at school, you know, and then, you know, if she had not performed too well, or she was sort of up to some shenanigans, and I was wondering if I was going to say anything or get angry, I never did, because when I turned that exit to Lewisburg, I saw right there in front of me the very spot on the side of Route 80 where I left my dad's car.
What does that feel? What does that feel like when you go past that?
Well, it's a deep thing. It's a very deep thing. I mean, so my wife will, you know, she'll tell you, when I really want to go write something, like, you know, when I was writing the Alzheimer's book for Hopkins, I would disappear for 3 days, and I would just go out to the Best Western Inn on Route 15 in Lewisburg, and I'd walk around the Bucknell campus, going to Lewisburg, get a pizza or whatever. But basically, I did that because I felt somehow connected with the place. It's a sort of, it's a holy ground for me. That place where I left my dad's car and wrote that note on that piece of paper in pencil. That's like, you know, it's kind of where my life began. People sometimes ask me where I'm from. You know, I'm not sure what I can say, but sometimes I say, well, just Route 80.
Oh, I love that. Dr. Post, man, this has been too quick. I can't believe time is up. I could talk to you all night. How can people find out more about you? Where can they find your work?
Well, I have a personal website, you know, Stephen with a PH, G like Gary, Post, Stephen G. Post, actually named after a county in Kentucky, Girard County, Stephen G. Post .com, and I can be emailed at well, my other big website would be the Institute. So if you go to unlimitedloveinstitute.org, that gives you the whole history of the institute that Sir John and I founded. Oh yeah, so yeah, Sir John faxed me from Lyford Key in the summer of 2000. He said, we need to start an institute to study the greatest human experience of generosity. We should call it the Institute for Research on Unlimited Love. And I got a little bit nervous because I was working in a medical school, and I said, maybe we should call it by fax creative altruism, because that's more of a sciencey term. And he faxed back, no, I think unlimited love up to $8.9 million. And Trey, I did what you and I think most of your listeners would have done. I responded, I said, Sir John, I love that language. It jumps right off the page. But he was right, because unlimited love is what all the spiritual traditions have always been telling us. And we don't need to be embarrassed about the word.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Dr. Post, man, this has been amazing. We're going to have to do this again sometime, but thank you so much for taking the time.
It's great. And good luck with your studies, and take care of Baltimore. I'm glad you're there. They need you.